Hello and welcome to Mostly Off Topic video in-depth review of the Mirror of Galadriel. Now this is something new that we're doing, trying to cover a card through a video, so bear with if it's not quite as polished as it could be. I've also chosen a card that's a little bit old now for Lord of the Rings. It came out in Celebrimbor's Secret. But I still think it's a pretty good card, and it has some upsides and some downsides that are quite interesting to cover. So just quickly running through the card. 1 cost Spirit Attachment. You can only attach it to Galadriel. You exhaust this particular card, you search your top 10 cards of your deck, add a card to hand, shuffle the deck, but then you have to discard a card at random from your hand. It's not unusual that that is the card you've just pulled. There are some ways to hard stop that, and there are some ways to mitigate that, and we'll cover those a little bit later on in the video. So what Mirror of Galadriel is good at is pulling together combo pieces. So there's a pretty famous in Lord of the Rings LCG land deck called Sea Stands Boromir, and what it does, it wants to stack Steward of Gondor on Boromir to then trigger Gondorian Fire or Blood of Numenor. So those trigger off the number of resources. However, you'll see from this deck, Steward of Gondor is out of faction. So what this deck does is it uses the Mirror of Galadriel to retrieve Steward of Gondor, but also a good harvest. And a good harvest allows the playing of the Steward of Gondor, and therefore the deck can get going. The sooner you get this combo to fire, the sooner the deck can be effective, and you have less problems in the early game. The other thing that you can do with Galadriel's Mirror is retrieve some key cards. So, for instance, in my Ladies What Quest deck, one of the key cards for that deck to have is a Test of Will. It needs to have cancellation. I always want to have one in hand because there's some nasty treacheries out there. So I typically use Galadriel's Mirror to try to retrieve a Test of Will, and at least keep one in hand if I haven't got any other ways of getting that. Now, Mirror of Galadriel even, synergizes pretty well with other card draw, not least of which Galadriel's own ability, where you can kind of reduce threat and draw a card. That's not such a bad thing to have. And I'll explain a little bit why card draw is pretty important for Mirror of Galadriel as we come to talk about mitigating the downside. Now, it can only be linked with Galadriel, however it does support her play style, so it's not an anti-synergy. So for instance, if you're kind of playing Galadriel, you're probably playing Nenya, which is her ring. Now you want to attach this Galadriel, it can only go on Galadriel. She gets a lore resource icon, and it allows her to effectively add her willpower, which is pretty high at 4 to a quest. So you can start to turn her into a questing character so long as one other player is out there questing. So let's just have a discussion then on the upsides of the Mirror of Galadriel. So I spoke about bringing cards to hand, in particular if you've got a combo or you've got key cards that you really need for your deck to be working. Now in Lord of the Rings you've got around about a 57% chance to see a 3 of card in a hand that you've mulliganed. So if you don't see it in the first time you mulligan again, 6 out of 10 times you're going to see that card. Let's just say it's the other 4 times you don't have that, but you do have a Mirror of Galadriel. So if you play Mirror of Galadriel and trigger that, then there's around about a 75% chance that you're going to pull 3 of into your hand. So effectively what this is doing is it's giving you a fair odds that you're going to see a card that you need to have. So if you're playing something like the Sea Stands Boromir deck, where you do want to have a good harvest, or you do want to have Steward of Gondor, then having a Mirror of Galadriel to bring that to hand pretty quick is excellent and allows you to get on with the game without trying to find the pieces. However, there's this random discard. Now that can be quite painful, particularly if you've got other pieces in your hand that you don't want to lose. So for instance, if I start off with a Test of Will in my hand, but I'm missing another piece, then do I really want to take the risk of losing that or the piece that I've got? So how do we mitigate the downside? So one of the key things I think is that it's less chance to lose the cards you want the more cards you've got in hand. So if you've got 6 cards in hand, you've got a 1 in 6 or 1 in 7 chance of dropping the card that you've just pulled. If you've got 10 cards in hand, then you've got a 1 in 10, 1 in 11 chance of dropping the card you have. So the first thing I think to consider with Mirror of Galadriel is that you want to be playing other card draw effects first, not least of which is Galadriel's own ability. You also want to trigger Mirror of Galadriel as early in the planning phase as possible, so don't be playing cards onto the table unless these are particularly cards that you kind of definitely, absolutely don't want to lose, because you want to trigger Mirror of Galadriel as a larger hand as possible. Now, some actions can be triggered out of planning sequence, so for instance, a player could trigger Berevor to allow you to draw a couple of cards. You could trigger Galadriel to draw a card for yourself, and therefore you could have 3 more cards, and therefore a lot less chance that the card that you're pulling you're not going to lose. However, there is also a single hard counter to the effect Mirror of Galadriel, and that is a silver harp. So it's in Sphere, it's a spirit card, it's an attachment, you can attach it to a spirit hero, it is restricted, and effectively after a card is discarded from your hand, exhaust Silver Harp to return that card to your hand. So, the relatively straightforward, you play Silver Harp onto one of your spirit heroes, you trigger Mirror of Galadriel, you randomly discard, and if it's the card you want to have, or a card you want to have, not necessarily one that you pulled, you exhaust Silver Harp and life is great. If you're not using something like Mirror of Galadriel, or you don't want to trigger it that turn or what have you, Silver Harp is great for any discard effect. So for instance, discard into Eowyn's, Spirit Eowyn's ability, and that's one of the ways in which I use it in my deck. Now you can also build up other cards such as Elven Light. Now Elven Light wants to be played from the discard pile. So in fact, if you've got Elven Light and you're ditching it, well, okay, life is good. You could also have Glorfindel. So ally Glorfindel, he is able to be played from a discard pile. So if you've got ally Glorfindel, you can ditch it through Mirror of Galadriel. So effectively, a card with either a hand with either Glorfindel or Elven Light in really doesn't have as much impact from Mirror of Galadriel. Now I also run Arwen hero in my quest deck alongside Galadriel, and you can see here that this is slightly anti-synergistic in that I'm discarding a card to add a resource. Now what I want to do is I want to discard that card after I've triggered Mirror of Galadriel. Otherwise, as I say, you got more chance of dropping what you've just pulled. So let's just go and see this in action then. So I've got an octagon game kind of already set up here. I'm just playing Journey Along the Anduin. I'm not actually going to play this game. I want it to take too long. This deck can't handle any kind of monsters. But you can see here that we have Eowyn, Galadriel and Arwen, and I've just started. I've taken a mulligan and I've also just drawn, so you can see I've got Mirror of Galadriel. I also have my favourite piece in a test of will, but I have an Elven Light. So what I am going to aim to do here is effectively play Mirror of Galadriel, trigger it straight away, and then I'm going to go and hunt 10 cards. And what I'm actually looking for at this stage of the game is the Silver Harp to allow me to mitigate the impact, because I use Mirror of Galadriel quite extensively throughout. So let's just do this then. So I bring that into the game. That costs me a resource. I'll just push this down to the back and then exhaust that. As you see, I've got 6 cards in hand. Now I could have ditched this to give a resource, and then in fact I could have pulled it back, but yeah, I want to keep my options open, see what I find. So if I look at the top 10 cards, I'm looking for a Silver Harp, and there we have one. Now the other options really aren't that attractive to me. I've already got Test of Will in hand, so I don't need to grab that one, but I'm going to pull that to hand now. So at this stage we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cards in hand. If I had ditched Elven Harp, I'd only have 6, so clearly the random discard is going to hurt there. So I've just ditched a Galadriel's Handmaiden, kept the Silver Harp in hand. So what I can now do is, I always, actually incidentally, I always want to have 1 resource left over to play Test of Will. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ditch this card to Arwen's ability. I'm going to give Galadriel the resource. I always give Galadriel the resource because when she gets Nenya, she has 2 spheres, Law and Spirit, and just pushing resources to her gives me more options. Then I'm going to spend the 2 Spirit resources to bring in the Silver Harp. So as you can see here, after a card is discarded from hand, I can exhaust this to return that card to hand. What this actually does in this scenario now, as we stand here, is I still have my 1, so I can cancel some treacheries. Now that wouldn't be a discard because I have to pay the cost of playing the card. However, with Eowyn's ability, I can quest for 1 more spirit more just by exhausting Silver Harp. So key summary really take out here is that the Mirror of Galadriel is excellent for bringing pieces to hand. You've just seen I brought the Silver Harp to hand. It has the downside of random discard. Fortunately we avoided that time, but by bringing Silver Harp to hand I can avoid the disadvantage of the cost of 2 resources effectively. Now if I don't use it to avoid Mirror of Galadriel, but I've got Eowyn or any other discard a card to pay problem, then I can use it there as well. Okay, hope you have enjoyed this video. I'm trying to keep it snappy so that it doesn't eat up too much time. If you've got any comments, just leave them in the comments field, and I hope that you have a good day. Thanks, bye.